Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrew. It's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon for this panel discussion on digital transformation in mining, unlocking efficiency and productivity. We have an amazing panel this afternoon, people that are really experts in digital technology and, of course, in policy related to that. So I'd like to introduce our first panellists this afternoon, Farzi Yusufali, who is the co-founder of StratumAI. Welcome to the stage. Dr. Aurela Shtiza, who is the Director of Industrial Affairs and Raw Materials at Industrial Minerals Association in Europe. Please welcome Aurela. Mark O'Brien, who's the General Manager, Digital Technology and Innovation at CITIC Pacific Mining. He has a number of titles, but we'll stick to CITIC for this afternoon. And Rasmus Tammia, who's the Program Manager, Artificial Intelligence in Mining, and he's at Boliden. Welcome. Great to have you all with us this afternoon, and so there's plenty of opportunity for us to really explore some of the big issues related to digital transformation. I'm going to start off with a general question this afternoon for everybody. Efficiency, safety and productivity. So from your perspective, which digital solutions are delivering the most transformative gains across the mining value chain, and how can companies accelerate adoption to realise the benefits at scale? So we might start with you, Farzi.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for being part of this panel. In terms of the digital solutions that I've seen that have provided outsized gains, it's the ones that directly introduce a feedback loop from the concentrate level right back to the drill rig. So when you have measured value, especially on the processing plant side, then you can actually track what you're putting in. What you find a lot of the time when I speak to clients is the process plant will ask for something, the geologist tries to deliver it, they don't deliver what they're asking, and they have no idea why that's the case. So when you start to introduce some level of data collection at the processing plant level, even if it's slight or on a daily basis, that's enough to then be able to back it all the way to what's being planned on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis.
And Rasmus, do you agree? What are you seeing?
First off, thanks for having me here. I agree that the processing plant is probably the most mature domain within the mining value chain, where you can really kind of benefit from these data-driven technologies. But we don't see that feedback loop back to the geologists that clearly, currently, unfortunately, I feel like geologists today don't get quite the credit that they deserve from that aspect.
Engineers then have to take the geologist's interpretations and create a real plan out of it, and then there's so many different levels of data there are data vacuums between these departments, and they need to be filled in a semi-efficient way.
And Mark, where do you see the gains?
Well, look, I think just pitching back a little bit at a higher level, I think across the industry, mining has always collected a lot of data and a lot of structured data. So I think we've always been a good candidate for a lot of machine learning type algorithms. And I would argue that actually a lot of our vendors have had some of these types of solutions in their systems in different ways, for quite a long time. So I think we've been seeing, some benefits already. But I think more recently, over the last few years, with the huge sort of pickup in interest around AI, which is a bit of a misnomer really, because it sort of buckets together a whole lot of different types of tools. But I think people are starting to realize, well, we can sort of bring lots of data sets together and start to do a lot more sort of multivariate type analysis and see what's correlating and what kind of gets interesting out of these massive data sets as we pull them together, which I guess has really opened some interesting insights. The whole LLM thing, with the ChatGPT type stuff, which deals with unstructured data, I think that's starting to really show some promise. But by and large, as an industrial entity, most of our key data is structured. But I think there are some interesting applications for taking that unstructured and again finding ways to integrate it. There's a good friend of mine at the University of Western Australia who's working on trying to figure out all those notes that engineers have kept about maintenance data. It's squeaking a bit, or it's making a strange sound, or it's sort of trying to take an LLM type model that they built and correlate that back to error codes, so they can actually say, well, this is a fault code specifically around those types of comments. So that's pretty clever. And I think as we sort of start to see the aggregation of these tools together and across larger data sets, I think we're seeing some really good opportunities right across the value chain to sort of bring some good decision support.
Fantastic. Aurela, I know that you're trying to look at policy in relation to a whole range of different technologies. Are you seeing the gains? How are you looking at some of these technologies? Are you seeing gains? Is it too fast for your policy world right at this stage?
Well, I mean, as a sector, we have heard in the last 3 days that mining sector is not a revolution, but is an evolution sector. So you need to go stepwise, because the risk of investing or being too quick or too fast, it might backtrack, because you as a geologist, if you want to make your case to the board, you need to have a business case behind. And I'll use the example of ESG, which in the morning I discovered that is not a fancy trend anymore or fancy term anymore. But when I think about ESG reporting, you rightly pointed. But the data, yes, but the data has been collected for a certain purpose. Responsible department is to be able to make your case, to see patterns. When you put all data together, it's not about exclusively the sustainability team using the data. It's about cross-functional fertilization of ideas. How do I do the most out of the data sets I have, which for a time being, they are a bit scattered. Everyone is own part of the data within the company. And now the EU law, because I'm speaking from a EU perspective, requires that you kind of integrate the data within data sets. And out of this integration, then you can do regional data subtraction or visualize what are the key trends. And with key trends, I'm referring, for example, to circular economy, to CO2 tracking, to water efficiency, to resource optimization. How do you do the connection of your quarry operation directly with the end user needs, by minimizing processing steps, by minimizing and being resource efficient, water efficient? How you are able to actually see value out of data. And this for me is what has been the pressure or the added value from a regulatory perspective. So it started in Europe, but I see that the trend is also is going to expand globally as well. So this will be a common challenge on a global level as well.
So it's a great point that you make. Oh, you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to fill in there. I mean, we hear all kinds of discussions regarding, okay, we have all of this data at our disposal, so let's get started. What I've seen when I meet a lot of kind of C-level executives is that nothing really happens, right? And then you have these public cloud providers from Silicon Valley saying that, look, we're going to solve all of your problems, just store them on our servers and so forth. And then you also have this question of, when do you actually need the data? How much does that entail in terms of cost? And then it becomes very, very complicated from a pure data engineering nerdy perspective. and then chaos.
If I just may add to that chaos, the data, we are in a mining sector. Data is power. In artificial intelligence, data is power. And at some point, we have also to ask the legal questions, who owns the data? Their company data asked to be put in an external server to be processed and to be able to make some patterns out of the data. But then the outcome of it, who owns that outcome? These are all legal questions that for some of our companies are important to be addressed from a legal viewpoint, but also to see what are the key patterns we can actually bring along or see within the data.
So, even from my perspective, having dealt with these companies and dealing with that question, who owns what? Where is the data being stored? How is it being used? It's almost important to, if you're looking at those solutions, to judge them appropriately as well. Are they meeting you where you need to be as part of that scoping? Because you can have AI, you can have all this data, but if you don't know what you need to solve, then you can't constrain your problem. So first you constrain your problem, you set up your scope of how you want to tackle that problem with AI. It could be as simple as, this is my world, so every day, so I'll pull a couple of use cases from literally today. So in one case, it's a dilution issue. Let's see if we can reduce the dilution by optimizing the blasting. That means I'll need their core data sets, I'll need their blast index, I'll need to know what their mill reports look like and how much waste they're getting. All of these are already defined. In another use case, it could be, I need to add resources fast because I'm nearing end of mine life within 5 years. I need their drilling data, I need to know their reserve models, I need to know. You can make those lists and you can constrain what data you choose to share and not share. But when you're dealing with a company like us, for example, you own the output. You're the ones operating on that, and you should be taking responsibility for that. It's up to the AI company to make you feel comfortable about what you're acting on.
So just to follow on from there, is all data equal?
No, definitely not, no.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, why not?
So this is the spicy part. This is coming from experience, so I say this with a little bit more, I have a stronger viewpoint on this. Not all data is created equal. In fact, in 70% of the clients I deal with, it actually causes more problems that it solves in terms of, different, because you could have two issues. One, you don't know how exactly you're using your technologies. Let's say you're implementing a certain sensor, you don't know how to maintain it, therefore when it's producing these data readings, it degrades over time. And then when you're acting on those decisions or acting on that data, you're causing more problems. The second and more common case I've seen is that they're collecting lots more data, but the incremental value creation that you're getting from collecting all this data is actually not worthwhile. So now you have to take a step back and say, for every single data point I'm creating, the cost of each data point isn't giving me an outsized return. And that's when very interesting conversations happen. And maybe you're not necessarily looking at this from a data collection problem. This is a data evaluation problem. Maybe not 100% of your problems can be solved, but maybe 60% or 70% can be solved with just the data you have. And I actually believe that quite strongly. Most mines already have all the data they need to solve 70% of the problems. It's just being creative about how you combine those data sets.
Mark, what do you think?
Well, I agree with the statement, not all data is equal. It's definitely true. In fact, I would say the reality is that for a lot of these sorts of projects involving AI and a lot of data, probably 70, maybe 80% of your time solving a problem is actually getting all your data sorted so that you can then run some of the algorithms and build models and stuff. So the easy part sometimes is that later stage of actually building the model, that getting the data right. So we did an exercise in our business where we basically wanted some mine-to-mill data, which involved basically pulling together 4 or 5 key big data sets and finding ways to connect them all in a solid time series that pulled all the threads together, and then we could feed it into a machine learning model and build something there that could tell us what a good day looked like in our operation, all the way from blast right through to the milling. So we had the data, but once we started to look at how we would bring these together and connect all these data sets. That was a bit of a challenge because there were some interesting problems of trying to get those all connected up with the right timelines. And the other piece was we just realized, well, some of the data wasn't very good. And so, you know, that was a problem. So there's a lot of things you begin to discover as you enter these waters. They're all, you know, they're solvable, and you can sometimes begin to go, well, you know, if we measured this would have been useful. We weren't, so okay, great, lesson learned. And you begin to sort of learn a lot of stuff. So I actually think the sooner you begin playing around with some of these opportunities, the quicker you begin to realize, you know, some of the stuff you're collecting isn't useful and what you maybe should be collecting. But definitely be real about the fact that probably a big chunk of your problem-solving exercise is going to be getting your data right. After that, things do sort of speed up a little bit. The only other thing I would add to this is that it's really critical, absolutely essential to have subject matter experts who are part of this process. Mm-hmm. You know, that process was an interesting one for us because we had a group, first group who worked on that problem, the mine-to-mill problem for us. Basically, you know, they came back with stuff that was statistically significant. You know, like if you use more explosives, you get smaller bits. Okay, you know, yes, true. Helpful? No. You know, so what we needed then was to introduce some SMEs into this picture to sort of go, look, you're looking, some of these things you're looking at just aren't that useful. Pull that out and focus here. And sort of people are able to guide that process of narrowing down on what was likely to be more useful, running some iterations of it, because that's the great thing about a lot of this is that you can't iterate your way through. And I think then you find some success. So definitely there's a bit of a journey to go through here with these types of problems. But I do say the sooner you start, the more you'll learn and be able to sort of then reap the benefits a bit sooner on the other side when you rethink your data.
So Rasmus, your lab, you're pioneering edge computing at the moment. How does processing data directly at the mine in mining? Do you think it enables faster decision making? And does it deliver the improvements in production stability and throughput?
Through baby steps, yes. It does. I mean, I'm a firm believer that rapid prototyping, some kind of an online solution towards your end user, really creates way more tangible results. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for us at our company to have our operators play and feel the actual AI-driven solutions because it becomes so apparent to them what you can actually do with that technology. Then also from a perspective with this lab regarding upskilling, I mean, it becomes very apparent that these less mature companies, what they call data scientists, actually entails data engineering, machine learning, data science, and so much more. You can actually look at the ads for those positions at those companies. If they're very broad, that's kind of a signal that these companies are not so kind of mature in their digitalization journey. So that's something that we have also learned along the way, I'd say.
So this next question's for the whole panel. Are there critical areas in the mining value chain, right through from that exploration to processing, where companies can achieve the most immediate and measurable value through digital investment?
I can start
Aurela?
with that. Yeah. I think so far I've heard from blasting to the supplier, but we just forget exploration. Without exploration, we have nothing. We have no deposit, we have no business plan to build our case on. So, and if you don't get the permit or if you don't get the exploration right, likely your modeling, geological modeling, will also not be very accurate. So already, when you have to go and do some drilling, you have a big visual impact on the drilling site. So this can be a stopper from a social license to operate perspective. So for me, if we are able to actually deliver some solutions which are drilling with invisible equipment or much less visible equipment which avoid disturbance in local community, you are able actually to start to build your future project on a very good solid basis. At least you have alerted the local community and you are working towards developing the future side. When it comes to the areas in terms of processing of the raw material. If you are able to collect all the data before, we're measuring because you have a pressure to measure. So you don't know why you are measuring at some point. So at the end of the day, we don't work how we are going to use the data next. We work because we need to report for specific data to the local authorities. So this already might be a trouble for the data processing later on, but at the beginning, this is how you started to actually collect the data. And in fact, some of the data sets that you have been collecting over the years, they have a specific or a very narrow scope under which you operate. And now you have to look with a different light to it. But if you are able to deliver savings on your processing within the boundaries of your operations, and then add value for your downstream users by using different monitoring tool and be able to see what the trends are, then you have actually used your digital systems in place to actually create value from the very early stage of the deposit on the processing steps, and then add value to your downstream users. And with the data, because you measure, you are able to demonstrate what you are doing. It's very difficult to quantify on monetary terms what it means in terms of savings, but at least you have some facts and figures to base your commercial or your marketing statements. And that, for me, in itself, it creates an additional added value in addition to the reporting per se.
Mark, what do you think?
Picking a particular area in mind is tough because I actually think really end-to-end there are opportunities everywhere.
Yes.
In fact, there's too many targets, so that's part of the problem is prioritizing and trying to figure out where you can get the best bang for buck. So yes, exploration, absolutely. Anywhere where we can, get actionable outcomes using, say less drilling and use the data more and get better inferences out of the data and make up some decisions based on some of that. Brilliant. There's definitely right through there's opportunities. The one thing I would say, a small caveat, is that I think, AI is everywhere. You can't go to a conference where AI is not, on the agenda in a big way. But the reality is it's just a tool. And it solves certain kinds of problems really well, and other problems maybe not so well. But there's a lot of hype, right? So I think people sort of think it's the magic bullet for everything. But I would say, like a couple of years ago, I was asked to review a bunch of the papers being submitted for the World Mining Congress in the AI area. And as I was reading a lot of these papers people have put forward for presentations, it became kind of clear to me. I have a maths background from the Dark Ages, and looking at some of the things that people have written, I thought, this problem, this has been solved in a different way, before. There's an area of maths called operations research. Some of you who are a bit grayer might remember that discipline, which I haven't seen on a curriculum in too many places in recent times. But there's this whole area of operations research where a lot of these problems have been solved using fundamental mathematical solutions that are much quicker, much cheaper, and probably a better bang for buck in terms of how you solve this, rather than just take as much data as you can and come up with an empirical solution, right? So everybody had their hammer and they're running around, using machine learning to solve everything. It's a bad idea because it can be quite costly and probably a little less precise in certain situations. So my only caveat is, take a good look at the types of problems you're trying to solve and actually figure out, is this the right tool? In some instances, it not only is the right tool, it may be the only tool where there aren't any good, obvious solutions, and maybe just getting a lot of data together and having a go at finding something is probably a good option and really will bring some interesting insights. But definitely there is this idea that AI is going to solve everything, and I would challenge that. I don't think that's true. There's a lot of opportunity, definitely, but I think mining needs to remain pragmatic and sort of focus on solving problems. Don't get too sort of caught up in the shiny object thing.
So I just want to stay with you just for a moment, because you're an expert in cybersecurity, and so we're seeing a lot of challenges with the introduction of AI and the rapid use of different tools. So how does the industry balance that position of the rapid movement of the technology and then protecting the systems within a company? How do you go about that in CITIC?
you cross your fingers a lot and hope that you spent money in the right places. I mean, look, the cybersecurity situation is really, it's a data problem in many respects. It's people, I mean, like we get, I don't know how many millions of emails every month, and fully 2/3 of them are spam or loaded with malware, 2/3. We have AI-based systems that are reviewing all this stuff and pulling out the crap and trying to prevent all those things. And similarly, we have a lot of other tools across our whole world that are using AI, but the bad guys are also using AI to just throw lots of stuff at us. And any of you who've ever dabbled, you realize there are some really good tools that allow you to brute force a lot of things. So definitely, the big challenge for any company, and mining's no different. Mining, I think, is starting to realize that we're not that unique, that people are interested in attacking us. And maybe they're not even that interested, we're just a target. The problem for us is our OT environments are probably the ones which are the scariest, because traditionally our operational technology areas have tended to be, a lot of people who value things just staying the same. And nobody messes with anything because it's working, right? And so that whole mentality can be pretty challenging to people coming in saying, hey, we should be patching things. We should be, applying some protections. Oh, you just stay away. I think that's changing a little bit now as we begin to realize that we're vulnerable. That just because like in Australia, we're physically isolated doesn't mean we're isolated. And people have a way of getting through. There's definitely been some cases, some celebrated cases of people being breached and that causing operational problems. We'll probably see more of that, I think, because at the end of the day, as a mining company, we have a lot of tool sets, most of them using AI in some form, but really it's just the hacker has to be right once. We've got to be right all the time in terms of the defense, and that's a tough gig, So the key is to minimize damage and then repair it as quickly as possible is kind of the philosophy, but it's a scary world.
But if I can just pitch in, is
Please
that
do.
I also see this quite a bit, that stuff that are commissioned and in production, they need to stay operational for the next decade, more or less. And I feel when it comes to innovation, that holds us back severely. Look, there's a reason why these consumer products from Apple, Microsoft, Google have so many incremental updates currently, whereas our vendors and suppliers within the mining industry, us as customers are saying, look, these things are just going to have to work for many, many years, which slows down product development, more or less. So I've spent tremendous amounts of time doing kind of risk analyses to be able to actually deploy my cloud-native AI solutions to production sites just for these reasons. I've spent almost a year doing risk analyses of saying, hey, look, if you're going to ruin our production, we're going to kill you, so you better be sure that what you're going to do is actually safe.
Farzi, how do you manage?
Yeah, so we take a very, because their takes are extremely right. Like we manage that by implementing the most strict rigor in terms of how we store the data, how we manage the data. We even ascribe to many of the regulatory bodies that are there. ISO 27001, SOC 2, there's a bunch of those that are out in the market. When we think about deploying a solution like this, it's almost as important as solving the problem. Deploying the solution correctly for the operator so that it has the uptime that they require 24/7. There's 365, there is no Christmas break, there is no New Year's. That's the expectation. And if your vendors or the people who you're trying to collaborate with don't understand that, then it's a non-starter. We had understood that from the beginning because, thankfully, I understood that mining culture, and I knew that was what was required to be built. But that also meant that when I'm building a system, it had to be sustainable not only for one mine, but for the clients that I have on every single continent, including Greenland. That is a requirement as well. So I have to not only think about the constraints of that mine in terms of what their accessibility is, their remoteness. I have to think about their data storage, and then how do I serve this in a way that they have access to their data at any given time of day or night. Doesn't matter if it's 3 o'clock in the morning for me. It really doesn't. So I would almost argue that deployment strategy is almost as important as the actual solution.
Aurela?
If I just may provide a practical case example, we're involved in a European project which was aiming to actually integrate data from the processing side. And we had a hard time to actually get the plant manager to be supporting the initiative. At some point, he was blocking it. And it was just before COVID. And we explained that the data integration will give you access to more information. And he knew, I know how the site operates. I don't need the IT tool. COVID strike. And then he realized he could actually control the plant from his own living room. He didn't have to go on site to be able to check and to fine-tune how things were doing. So I totally understand that we have to be cautious on what we embark on, and of course we take the most highest level of precaution possible, but risk zero does not exist. And I think there is a change in the concept. Yes, companies are very cautious on what to embark on, so when they develop this artificial intelligence tool, initially they start with their own company tool, which are tested, are fed internally, and then maybe they might make part of it accessible to external stakeholders for different reasons. But at the end of the day, they also see the added value on different aspects of it. Of course, the risk is still there. It needs to be managed properly. People need to be trained to move towards more digital tools. But there is also the duty to actually upskill the existing, the people that work now on site, which have never used a digitally advanced tool for it, but also prepare the upcoming young ones that are only used to swipe their information to go back to paper in case there is an emergency. So I think we need to think on twofold. There is an advancement, but you should always be able to use a backup solution, even if that solution means, as a geologist, you have to go to a map and to see what the map looks like. So I think there are two sides of the story, and we need to be holistic to look at it in order to be able to make the right decision and be agile to adapt ourselves.
So you mentioned upskilling, and I'll go to other panel members because things are moving fast. We've got small companies, large companies. In the last leadership roundtable, we're talking about, geologists. With geologists, sometimes they would argue it's more of an art than a science in terms of what you're looking for. What strategies have proven most successful in implementing training for companies, the companies you're working for and that you've observed, in terms of getting people on the same page in terms of new data, new technologies? What would you say about that, Rasmus?
Run faster than everybody else internally.
Yeah.
Then people get this sense of urgency. Look, what is he doing that or she doing that I don't understand? I need to really pick up. Honestly, we have tried to do these training programs. We've failed tremendously. So just be a good example at your company, and hopefully you're going to get a few followers. That's my honest answer currently.
Mark, are you seeing,
is
that the sort of approach you would take?
I agree. The training stuff hasn't worked for us either. What has worked is relationships with key leaders in certain areas, helping them to understand the technology a little bit, show and tell type sessions. But I think we definitely have actually seen a growth in the last few years amongst some of our key, like reliability engineers who were quite used to downloading everything into a spreadsheet and then doing their magic in Excel. Sort of suddenly realizing, I could dump this and do some Python. And they've been, one of the guys said, I've been doing some Python courses at TAFE, and it's like, well, brilliant, good for you, And so just encouraging people and resourcing them and saying, well, how can we help you with that? And sort of trying to give them some tips and show them the way forward. I think the key message that that I try to communicate when I'm around the place is that, I definitely don't believe the rhetoric that's of AI taking jobs. To the extent that is sometimes portrayed in the media. I think if AI can fully take your job, you've got a pretty crap job. Because at the end of the day, the types of things that AI is really, really good at is replacing, some things that are repetitive, boring, mundane, or overwhelmingly complex, where the AI can do that stuff a lot better. But the potential for AI to make your job a lot more interesting and to take you away from some of the heavy lifting, to automate aspects of what you do. And I've seen that in my own personal, workflows where I've got AI stuff doing stuff for me, where it just takes away a lot of that stuff that I used to do manually. It's brilliant, right? So I think every job is a strand of tasks, a bundle of tasks, and I think we'll see some of those strands taken away and replaced, and the jobs themselves will restructure around new types of responsibilities. I think that's probably what's going to happen, and that's where I'm sort of regularly saying to people, look, learning this stuff's key, because it's going to make you better at your job. It's going to make your job more interesting. It'll help you be one of the people who's a bit faster than all your colleagues, and you're not the Luddite in the corner who's still excelling it. So I think that's the kind of messaging that we've been trying to push through. I think we are in a bit of a transition period. I think a lot of the young people coming through are definitely the kind of natives around this stuff. They get the tech, they seem a lot more adept at this stuff. And so I think that's the cool thing. When I see a lot of the research papers coming out of mining schools, they're all machine learning papers, so it's like these guys really know data. And they're going to come into the workforce equipped to really be a lot better and a lot more efficient, which is, I think, a cool thing. That's a good thing.
So you're in that young category,
yeah.
Farzi.
Although you're pointing at
Unequivocally.
You too, Mark.
I'm in the young category.
How do you see the skills profile changing?
Yeah.
Mark talked about strands being taken away. What do you think?
Yeah, I can actually speak from experience, because we've implemented our systems on multiple mines, big and small. So from the majors to the smallest. What I've found, both of you are right, training programs don't work. They really don't. The thing that has worked consistently for us, and this happened by accident, is by bringing in the key stakeholders as part of the design process. And in the same way that you bring in subject matter experts to inform the decision making, we revealed some of the secret sauce of what's happening on the other side, because then they provide their insights too. So then when you finally deploy the technology and it's being used, like you're right. For example, for your mine planners, they really don't like updating their models and then rejigging all their production schedules. They don't like that. So when we take over that part of the system, I'm giving one example where we took over their grade control, and we updated with new data every week, literally every week, and they get a new model that they can use that's updated with the best information they have to decide what they're going to mine. They are not doing that anymore. But that was what was required of them. They did not have the capacity to do that. Instead, now what they're doing is looking at placing their more sophisticated rigs, their drill rigs, their RC rigs, to think about long-term mine planning. What kind of adjustments can I make on in my long-term production schedule to see what my production outlook looks like next year? They're not now chasing every reaction. They're not just reacting to every situation that happens at a mine. A mine is a collection of fires. They're always putting out fires. That is their job. What if we took out the mundane part of that work, and then they become part of that expansion on the solution? So for the same group, after we took over that grade control, the next thing we started doing was doing some really unique data collection for silica, because silica is very hard material for them, and that was a huge throughput and a very high cost for them from the processing side of things. That's when things become really interesting. That's when they take ownership, and then all of a sudden they start to get wise on how things work on the other side of our side of the world.
Now we're coming right to the end, and it's been a fascinating discussion. Mm-hmm. So I want you to just mention one thing, one AI-driven innovation that you would want to see implemented, which would guarantee success. So you've got 10 seconds each.
Okay. I would love to see metallurgical tests being mapped to assays at the FS to DFS stage. There are lots of projects out there that are completely viable, but that multivariate data is not being put together to basically figure out whether this is a production-worthy asset or not. I think so many projects can be greenlit if that data was collected earlier.
Aurela, very fast.
As I work on policy, I mean, my recommendation will be to link data with reporting, how to make that task as easy and as smooth as possible and working cross-functionally. This will be my wish for Christmas, for this event.
Mark?
We haven't talked much about safety data, but I think it's a good thing that everyone goes home every night from a mining operation, and there's a lot of opportunity, I think, end-to-end for us to be monitoring and paying a lot more attention to what people are doing, how well protected they are, whether they're putting themselves into the line of fire or danger, and being able to intersect with those opportunities very quickly to protect people. I think there's some real positive outcomes out of that.
And to finish off, Rasmus.
Non-linear model predictive reinforcement-based controller looking at mine-to-mill.
Fantastic. You'll have to explain that to everybody right at the end. Great discussion this afternoon. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. Will you please thank our panelists this afternoon for a great discussion?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much.